Hello and welcome to the program. I am Adeshawa Josh. It's time to take you through major headlines around the world. Now we have to start here. The U.S. has carried out its first airstrike against Islamic State IS militants under a new strategy to defeat the group. The U.S. military said Monday's strike had destroyed an IS fighting position southwest of Baghdad that had been firing on Iraqi forces. It came 5 days after U.S. President Barack Obama outlined his plan to degrade and ultimately destroy IS. IS has seized large areas of Syria and Iraq and declared a caliphate. The U.S. has also been building a broad coalition to fight the jihadist group, which is also known as ISIL. In a speech last week, President Barack Obama unveiled a 4-point plan to defeat IS using airstrikes, support for Iraqi troops, anti-terrorism activities, and humanitarian aid. U.S. Secretary of State Chuck Hagel believes a coalition of forces is needed to fight IS. Let's move on to other stories now. 6 Egyptian policemen have been killed by a roadside bomb in the Sinai Peninsula. The tragic incident was confirmed by Egyptian Interior Ministry. The bombing took place on the road between Rafah on the border with Gaza and North Sinai's provincial capital El Arish. 2 officers were also hurt in the attack. Militants in Sinai have intensified their attacks on the security forces after the military overthrew President Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood last year. Responsibility for past attacks has been claimed by al-Qaeda-linked group Asabaid al-Makadis. The group says it is avenging the hundreds of Islamists killed and thousands detained in a crackdown on Mr. Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood. And as West Africa continues to fight the Ebola virus disease, the UN's Ebola coordinator, David Nabarro, says as much as $1 billion is needed to extinguish the virus. He says the amount is needed as the way the outbreak is advancing. The level of surge needed is unprecedented. There has been criticism concerning the slow response by the international community to the virus. But the U.S. has announced plans to send 3,000 troops to Liberia, which has been the worst hit by the disease. Medical charity Medecins Sans Frontières has urged other countries to do the same.
United States Ambassador Samantha Power announced the United Nations Security Council will hold an emergency meeting on the Ebola crisis on Thursday, September 18th. Speaking to reporters of the United Nations, Power warned that the situation on the ground is dire and called on the international community to act collectively to stem the spread of the virus.
As you know, Liberia is one of 3 West African countries ravaged by the recent and growing Ebola outbreak. I won't mince words. The situation on the ground is dire and growing worse by the day.
Meanwhile, the United Nations agency today warned that humanitarian crises such as political conflicts and Ebola poses a new threat to the global fight to eradicate hunger. Speaking at the Rome headquarters of the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, as food and aid agencies gathered to release the annual report on world hunger, the United Nations top agency said the number of hungry people in the world has fallen to more than 100 million in the past decade, but 805 million, or 1 in 9, still do not have enough to eat. Conflicts in places such as Iraq, Syria, and the Central African Republic and health emergencies like the Ebola virus have led to an increased food crisis.
The world now faces an unprecedented level of crisis, and the biggest challenge to achieving zero hunger is the challenge of acute hunger and the demands of meeting acute hunger as a result of crisis, shocks, and conflicts.
An unprecedented health emergency which is rapidly becoming a major food crisis. You cannot isolate and treat 1 million people without addressing the food and nutrition challenges of ensuring that those individuals receive assistance. Meanwhile, the United Nations has called for concerted efforts to fight the virus. The body released a new bill of up to $1 billion to contain the disease in West Africa.
We're now being joined by VOA's Luis Ramirez. He is in Washington. He's joining us live now to talk more about the U.S.'s plan to help curb the spread of Ebola in West Africa. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Hi. Well, it is indeed a very big plan, getting the attention of no less than President Obama himself. In just a few hours, he's getting ready to board a plane and travel to the headquarters of the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, where he's going to get a briefing on efforts thus far to fight the spread of the Ebola virus. His focus is on West Africa, and to that effect, he's going to unveil a major plan to combat and to confront the spread of the disease. We're talking, as you mentioned earlier, about 3,000 U.S. troops going to the region. Full might of the U.S. military behind that. Administration officials have been saying that this is, for the president, a national security priority. And to back that up, well, we have those 3,000 troops. We have the Department of Defense asking for $500 million to deal with this. They're going to be assisting in efforts to set up command centers to deal with it. They're going to be providing transportation. Much of this will be based in Liberia, but of course the U.S. is not planning to establish any permanent basis for this effort.
Now, we're talking about a health crisis here. A lot of people will be asking, what has ground troops got to do with curbing the Ebola virus disease?
Well, you see, the effort is not only military, it's multifaceted, and that's what the president will talk about, it being a comprehensive effort, one in which the Centers for Disease Control, which already has sent 100 experts to work in the region of West Africa, also sending doctors, USAID going to work on the ground, distributing information on prevention, on containment, and assessing the situation on the ground. Another very important element of Mr. Obama's plan to deal with the outbreak is to look at ways to mitigate the economic losses that will result from the spread of this disease. So we're talking about a very comprehensive approach. Of course, the most visible aspect of it is the military aspect, but it is multifaceted.
Now, what more do we know about the crisis, the food crisis, according to the FAO meeting recently, talking about the food crisis could aggravate, the spread of the Ebola virus?
That is one of the major elements, one of the major concerns that this plan seeks to address. One of the main parts of the strategy is not looking just at the spread of the disease itself, but at the secondary problems that will result, what you're talking about, and also the economic aspects.
Okay, moving on now. Do we have any plans from the United States to build more health facilities? Because that appears to be the major issue right now in Liberia.
Yes, that is one of the plans, is to set up temporary hospitals to deal with the outbreak, also to train up to 500 healthcare providers each week, so that eventually it's not U.S. doctors, U.S. forces dealing with this, but Africans themselves going and dealing with this disease. That's part of the strategy.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us on the program. Luis Ramirez, VOA's correspondent, talking to us live from Washington. Thanks a lot. We'll take a short break now on The World Today. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at the Scotland independence. Well, they are going to be voting whether to be a part of Britain or not in the next 2 days. So stay with us.